I still remember the look on Malcolm's face, stone still, like he was watching a car crash in slow motion but refusing to blink. The kind of stillness that either means you're about to break or about to bury someone. We were all packed into conference room C, every chair filled, some folks standing along the walls pretending not to sweat. Trent Barlow, our shiny new CFO, stood at the front with his smug little clicker, flipping through a deck that might as well have been titled, "Who I Think is Useless." "We're streamlining operations," he announced with all the warmth of a tax audit. "Non-revenue departments will be undergoing efficiency realignments, effective immediately." Then he just started reading names. No warning, no prep, not even eye contact. Just names like he was calling out pizza orders. "Malcolm Reeves," he said, pausing to adjust his tie like he just solved poverty. "Compliance coordinator, severance package available at reception. Thank you for your service." A few heads turned. Most of us kept our eyes down. I caught Malcolm's eyes for a split second across the room, and I swear I saw something flicker. Not shock, not even anger, just this deep, measured calculation, like a man who just realized the last piece of the puzzle had finally dropped into place. If you're still listening to this and haven't subscribed, take a second. Click that button. Throw a like on the video. I promise it really helps our team keep digging up these stories and getting them to you. Most folks never subscribe, but everyone counts more than you think. Anyway, Trent went on, trimming the company like he was pruning dead branches from a tree he didn't even plant. Said something like, "Compliance is a necessary evil, but it's bloated here. We'll be outsourcing certifications next quarter." Bloated? Malcolm was compliance, 19 years, no scandals, no missed filings, no fines. The man probably had the IRS on speed dial and knew more about Section 404 than most auditors who wrote it, but Trent didn't care. He was chasing numbers. Fast wins before end-of-year bonuses got tallied. Malcolm didn't say a word. He just nodded once, slow, like he was marking a mental checkbox. Then he picked up the manila envelope off the cart by the door, his "thank you for your loyalty" from HR, and walked out of the room. No fanfare, no last look. No, "you'll regret this." Just gone. Except, not really. Because the next morning I watched him walk in again. Not to beg, not to clean out his desk, but to grab a binder. The one locked in that battered old drawer he never let anyone touch. I remember asking if he needed help. He looked at me, smiled just enough to make me feel colder than I should have, and said, "No thanks, Amanda. I'm just preparing for next week." "Next week?" I asked. He tapped his phone screen. The audit calendar. Federal compliance review, Monday 8 a.m., still on the books. Then he left. Again. Same slow walk, same dead calm stare. I didn't realize what I'd just witnessed until much later. I thought I was watching a man get fired. Turns out I was watching a match get lit. Malcolm's house was quiet in that eerie way a place gets when it's holding its breath. No TV, no music, just the soft mechanical hum of the air vents and the sharp click of a binder unlocking on the kitchen table. I watched him from across the room. He didn't ask me to stay, but he didn't ask me to leave either. That man had always been ritualistic, borderline obsessive with how he labeled and filed. But that night, he opened that old compliance binder like it was a confession booth, and for the first time, I saw what his silence really sounded like. The thing was massive, black, leather-wrapped, thick as a phone book, and organized with color-coded tabs and laminated index sheets. He flipped past sections like he already knew where every receipt lived, where every clause was buried, where every form he'd ever touched still breathed. Then he landed on the quarterly compliance logs, each stapled with a printed copy of the submission confirmation. His name stared up from every single one. Not reviewed by, not assisted with, filed and signed by Malcolm Reeves' Internal Compliance Authority. I think he already knew it, but seeing it all stacked like that must have triggered something. He didn't say a word. He just took a Post-it, scribbled 2007-2025 Q4 on it, and stuck it on top of the pile like he was labeling evidence for a case nobody had officially opened yet. He reached for his laptop next, flipping it open with that same deadly calm. No drama, no slamming keys, just surgical clicks. Outlook, search bar, subject, update, Fed rule changes. Sender, Malcolm Reeves, dozens of hits popped up, all sent to Trent Barlow, all unopened. One in particular stood out. It was flagged important, dated 3 months ago, and titled SEC Alert Required Internal Certification Shift. Action Needed. Malcolm clicked it open. Attached was a scanned memo from the feds detailing new rules that required formal handoff documentation anytime a federally authorized signatory left a role. Guess who never acknowledged it? He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, then reached for the dusty scanner he kept under a side table, slid the memo in, scanned it, renamed it, ignored Federal Handoff, Notice 20 Winkney 5, PDF, clicked save. I watched his hands, steady, methodical. No emotion on his face, but something tightened in the air around him, like the walls were about to shift, like the room itself knew something big had just shifted. Then he froze. Halfway through flipping a page, his thumb stopped. I leaned closer and saw what had caught his eye. A single line on a notification form that looked old but recently updated. Something from the Office of Federal Financial Oversight. Bold font, bottom corner. Point of contact for current period, Malcolm Reeves, Internal Compliance Liaison. His name. Still listed, still official, still active. He didn't smile, not really, but his jaw unclenched. That same slow breath left his nose like a diver coming up from a deep dive. Then he closed the binder and pushed back from the table. I asked him, "What are you going to do?" He didn't look at me right away, just stared at the binder like it was something sacred or dangerous. Maybe both. Then he finally said, "You ever hear the sound of someone locking a vault behind you while thinking they're the one holding the key?" I shook my head. He smiled, faint, almost like it hurt. They fired me before checking if I had the codes to the damn vault. And that was it. He walked into the next room, came back with a sealed manila envelope, slid the newly scanned files inside, and labeled it Personal Disclosure for review. I wanted to say something, but he looked at me then, not with anger, not even sadness. Just this deadly, still clarity I'd never seen before. "You wanted me gone?" he said, not to me, but maybe to the empty room. Let's see how gone I am. Monday morning came cold and gray, the kind of sky that looks like it's holding something back. I offered to drive him, but Malcolm shook his head, already wearing that same brown field jacket he always used when something serious was about to happen. He didn't take his briefcase, just the manila folder tucked under one arm like it was part of him. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just that same flat calm he'd carried since Trent read his name off like a grocery item. I didn't go in with him. Obviously. Government buildings don't exactly roll out the welcome mat for tag-alongs. But I waited in the car and watched. The building wasn't flashy, just a brick slab with a seal on the door and security that watched you like you were already guilty. Malcolm walked in like he belonged there, like he'd always belonged there, like his name was already etched somewhere in the walls and someone just forgot to tell the new CFO. Inside, the audit was already underway. The Office of Federal Financial Oversight sends their agents in suits that don't wrinkle, with clipboards instead of laptops and expressions that haven't cracked since 1992. 3 of them sat at a rectangular table, already sifting through boxes of documentation Pintara had been required to prepare. Boxes that, I guarantee you, Malcolm had organized himself months earlier. He didn't say hello, didn't introduce himself, just walked right in through the open door like a man delivering mail, and one of the auditors, woman, maybe late 40s, hair pulled tight, glanced up from her notes. "Mr. Reeves, you're early," she said, blinking once like her schedule had just glitched. Malcolm placed the folder on the table. Neat, centered. "Just dropping this off before I go." The label was handwritten, but Malcolm's handwriting was always surgical. Personal disclosure, Dec 15, 2025 for immediate review. No legal letterhead, no flashy binder, just ink and truth. The folder sat there for a second before anyone moved. One of the other auditors reached for it, paused, and then slowly slid it across the table toward himself like it might explode. Malcolm didn't stick around. He turned, nodded once, and walked out without another word. Not rushed, not smug, just done. Back in the car, I didn't ask what was inside. I didn't have to. I'd seen the contents laid out like a war plan the night before. Sequential quarterly filings, compliance memos, screenshots of unanswered emails. And that notification form, his name still legally active in the system. But that wasn't the real payload. The real bomb was the fact that Pentara had just walked into a federal audit without their designated compliance officer, without notifying the agency, and without a formal transition plan. And worse, the person they had fired still held the key to the vault. He sat in the passenger seat beside me, didn't say much, just looked out the window as if counting something invisible. Then finally he muttered, "They're going to open it. They have to. Once they do..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I asked quietly, "And when they ask why you were there?" He looked at me like it was the simplest answer in the world. Because my name was still on the door. We drove home in silence, but in my chest, I felt it. That low, heavy pressure before a storm hits. Not loud, not violent, but building. Quiet, relentless, like a fuse that had already been lit by someone who was too calm to need matches anymore. I didn't know when the fallout would come, but I knew this. When someone like Malcolm moves with that kind of numb precision, it's never random. It's surgical. And something was already bleeding. The doors to the executive floor weren't made for slamming, but somehow they still did when the lead auditor pushed through them. Her heels echoed like gunshots against the marble, each step cutting through the hushed glass and steel silence of Pentara's corner suites. No knock, no assistant announcing her, just a cold arrival and a voice like frostbite. "Why does the name Malcolm Reeves appear on every active compliance report?" she said, holding up a printed log. "And why is he the only staffer listed in your whistleblower liaison file?" Every head in the room turned. Trent Barlow, mid-sip of some smugly overpriced green juice, choked and lowered his glass. He blinked like he didn't understand the question. Or maybe like he wished he didn't. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't even supposed to be on the floor that day. But word travels fast when the feds show up with questions, and by the time someone had texted me, I was already standing by the break room coffee bar, pretending to fix a cup while the entire exec wing held its breath. Trent stood from his leather chair, smoothing his jacket like he thought tailoring might help him lie better. He was just operations support, filing, internal stuff, not decision-making. The auditor didn't blink. She didn't even acknowledge the excuse. She just lowered the paper, slid another page from her folder, and set it on the table with both hands like she was placing a gravestone. "You terminated the company's federally authorized signatory without notifying our office. That is a breach of compliance protocol under Section 74C, subsection 2.7.3. No replacement was filed. No handoff was documented. Your company is currently operating without a recognized compliance authority." The silence that followed wasn't silent. You could hear the shift, the way people started breathing differently, how shoes scraped under chairs, how someone's knuckles cracked a little too loud. I swear, the thermostat kicked louder than normal just to fill the dead air. "Who approved the termination?" she asked. Trent swallowed. "It was a restructuring initiative." "Was legal informed?" she shot back. Yes, I believe so." The auditor raised one brow. "You believe?" Another exec, Angela from finance, chimed in weakly. "There must have been a miscommunication." That's when the second page came out. Not just Malcolm's name on the reports, but an email trail, one that showed Malcolm had submitted a copy of the federal notification form 3 months ago, one that Trent never opened, one labeled Action Required, Compliance Officer Transition Protocol. You could feel the confusion start to spread like ink in water, small, then bleeding outward. People looking at each other, at Trent, at the door, wondering if they were now complicit, wondering what else Malcolm had left behind in the seams. "I'd like access to all compliance-related communication for the last 6 months," the auditor said, already typing notes into a device none of us had ever seen before, including Slack threads, file transfer logs, internal memos, and HR records related to Mr. Reeves's termination. Trent's face went pale, but he tried to pull it together. "This feels like a misunderstanding. We were told compliance had become automated." That was the wrong thing to say. The auditor looked up sharply. "Compliance isn't a chatbot, Mr. Barlow. It's a legal structure, and you've just removed the spine." She walked out without another word, her heels slicing through the quiet again. I stayed frozen by the break room doorway, holding a half-full coffee cup I forgot I was even making. The executives looked like people who had just realized they were standing on a trap door. And somewhere out there, probably in his quiet living room with that same damn binder still on the table, Malcolm Reeves was watching the clock. Not gloating, not celebrating, just waiting. Because when you remove someone who signs the reports that keep your house of cards from collapsing, you'd better pray they don't decide to let the wind in. The walls didn't come crashing down. Not yet. No, they started hissing. Cold, brittle sounds like a frozen lake groaning underfoot before it snaps. It began with a simple request from the audit team. Please provide all internal communication regarding Mr. Reeves's role transition. What they got back was a digital graveyard, emails that bounced, threads that were never replied to, dozens of unopened attachments with subjects like handoff required and pending reg update, immediate action. Trent had archived them all like they were spam. The auditors didn't get angry, they just got quiet. That's how you know you're in trouble. They started asking specific questions: dates, times, versions, routing logs. Then came the Slack subpoenas. The company's legal team tried to delay it, claimed Slack wasn't part of formal communication, and the lead auditor just gave them this long, dry stare like a school teacher waiting for a kindergartner to realize glitter isn't edible. Then came the freeze. The auditors flagged a $12 million vendor payment tied to consulting services. The transfer had been approved 2 days after Malcolm's termination, with no compliance review, no secondary authorization, and no documented justification. When asked who cleared it, Trent muttered something about delegated authority, but the delegation form? Non-existent. The compliance handover log? Completely blank. By Tuesday, Trent's voice had developed this permanent quiver. Like a man standing on a balcony he suddenly realized was built without screws. In the Wednesday exec meeting, I watched him go full scorched earth, blamed his executive assistant for missing the memo, then blamed IT for deleting a calendar alert, then tried to pin it on the old compliance software being outdated and confusing. Legal sat in the corner, arms crossed, not saying a word. Finally, during a pause, their lead counsel looked up and said, "We are not covering decisions that bypassed protocol. You acted unilaterally." Trent went pale. I had full authority. Legal didn't blink. Not for federal compliance. That was Mr. Reeves. You removed him without replacement and without notifying our team. That's negligence. It was the first time I saw Trent look genuinely scared. Not PR mess scared. Prison time scared. The man was sweating through his designer shirt, trying to find footing in a room that was turning on him like a pack of wolves who just figured out the alpha was wounded. And all the while, Malcolm was silent. He didn't post a rant. He didn't send a smug email. He didn't call anyone to say, "I told you so." But his name still appeared on the official Federal Registry as Pentara's designated compliance liaison. Still attached to every document they were now trying to explain. Still printed at the bottom of the quarterly filings stacked on the auditor's desk. He wasn't just haunting the system. He was the system. I caught a glimpse of him once that week, through the glass doors of a coffee shop across the street. He was sitting by the window, calm as ever, reading a paperback and sipping black coffee like he didn't just toss a grenade into the company's legal department. I wanted to ask what he was thinking. I wanted to know if he felt vindicated, but something about the way he didn't even glance toward the Pentara building told me everything. He wasn't watching the building burn. He was making sure the fire alarms stayed off long enough for the right people to still be inside. By Thursday morning, the audit team wasn't just reviewing. They were excavating. Each question they asked opened up another hole in the floorboards, and soon it wasn't just about Malcolm's firing. It was about what he saw before he left, and what everyone else ignored. The first thread they pulled was one I remembered hearing Malcolm grumble about months ago, back when he still ate lunch at his desk and used phrases like compliance bottlenecks while chewing turkey on rye. Offshore payments labeled as consulting services had been trickling out of an auxiliary account tied to a shell firm in the Caymans. Nothing criminal on the surface, but Malcolm had flagged the volume and frequency as irregular. He'd submitted a pattern report, tagged it high priority, and sent it to Trent, Legal, and Risk. None of them responded. The auditors found that report Thursday afternoon, filed in Q3 labeled Preliminary Transfer Anomaly Summary, logged through the internal system with a timestamp and full backup trail. Trent had never opened it. Not once. Worse, Malcolm had followed up with a second document 2 weeks later, this one flagged in bold, Urgent, Tier 1 Disclosure, Potential Violation of Foreign Entity Review Protocol. That one had a read receipt attached. The system showed it had been forwarded by Trent to his assistant with the comment, "Remind me to skim." It was never opened again. When the auditors brought this to light, things shifted. You could feel it, like the temperature dropped a few degrees in the building, like people started walking slower past Trent's office, like conversations stopped when you opened a door. Investors were already sniffing trouble by that point. Rumors of the audit had leaked, not publicly, but just enough to rattle the firm's biggest whales. One call reportedly ended with an executive from Avondale Capital saying, "Either your CFO is lying or your controls are non-existent. Pick which one I report." Trent started skipping meetings. Legal moved into full CYA mode, digging into who actually had access to which accounts and who signed off on the last batch of outgoing wires. Spoiler, it wasn't Malcolm. He'd been raising flags, not pushing buttons. By Friday, the board started doing what boards do when they smell regulatory blood, calling private meetings, whispered huddles in glass rooms with the blinds half shut. One board member, older guy with a cane and a voice like an old Buick engine, asked flatly in a strategy review, "Was there a backup for this man, or were we just flying blind the whole time?" No one answered, because the answer was Malcolm. And while the board panicked, while legal hedged, and while Trent's office became a silent tomb full of half-read Slack messages and missed calls, the wheel kept turning. Because the thing about compliance is that it doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't scream. It documents. It timestamps. It waits. And Malcolm had done all of that religiously. Every ignored memo, every unfiled disclosure, every unread report. It was all still there. Organized, labeled, dated, and archived like a ledger built for Judgment Day. And now, piece by piece, it was being exhumed by people with clipboards and federal credentials. I checked in on Malcolm once that day. I texted him, "Are you seeing all this?" He just replied, "Did you know the offshore payments started the same week Trent closed the office for renovations?" That was it. He didn't say, "Told you so." He didn't gloat. He didn't even add a period. Because for Malcolm, this wasn't about revenge. This was about process. About finishing the job even after being shoved out the door like he didn't matter. He had warned them. They had ignored him. And now the system he built, quiet, slow, methodical, was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Expose everything, thread by thread. Friday evening, the office was running on fumes and anxiety. The only sound was the hum of overworked printers and the occasional shuffle of footsteps from people trying to look busy but secretly texting updates under their desks. Then, the moment came that nobody wanted, but everybody expected. The seal broke. Not with a bang or some dramatic press release, just a quiet envelope opened under controlled lighting in the internal audit room by the lead investigator herself. The whistleblower file, stamped, registered, and authenticated, submitted 2 weeks before Malcolm's termination. Dated, signed, complete. The room had 3 people in it when it happened. The investigator, her deputy, and Pentara's legal counsel, who had requested a courtesy review before the feds made it official. He left 20 minutes later looking like someone had walked across his grave. Malcolm's report wasn't just detailed, it was surgical. He hadn't written it in rage. It wasn't a rant. It was a damn blueprint. The violations were clearly outlined by category: unauthorized financial disclosures, offshore transfers without dual sign-off, breach of federal compliance continuity, failure to report risk under FFRA Section 112G. He didn't speculate. He cited internal memos, linked source files, and appended screenshots with metadata intact. The timeline wasn't vague. It was structured like a war log. Dates, times, correspondence history, escalation attempts. Each ignored email wasn't just noted. It was time-stamped and cross-referenced against board meeting minutes and vendor payment records. And the projection? He'd calculated the regulatory fines to the dollar: $4.3 million in probable penalties, $12.7 million in investor risk, $28.5 million in potential class action exposure if certain risk clients chose to pursue breach of fiduciary trust. The kicker? Trent's name was all over it. He'd not only ignored Malcolm's flagged disclosures, he had rerouted them. The auditors connected the dots, a pattern of emails redirected to review folders that nobody actually monitored. One flagged as "for Trent only" was never opened, even though it contained internal confirmation that the Cayman's vendor was flagged in a previous OFAC inquiry, and it didn't stop at Trent. 2 other names appeared in Malcolm's report. A junior finance exec who'd pushed several payments through late at night, well past normal approval windows, and a senior legal advisor who'd emailed Malcolm privately to "let it go, we're covered at the board level." That sentence alone sent up every red flag in the book. At 6:14 p.m., the lead auditor stood from her desk, walked down to the conference room, and quietly made a call. No announcement, no broadcast, just one direct line to the Federal Whistleblower Protection Office. That's when everything changed. Audits are routine, annoying, slow, but whistleblower reports? That's when the gloves come off. That's when the rooms get locked and badges start scanning red instead of green. It wasn't an audit anymore. It was an investigation. By 6:43, an encrypted document request was sent to Pentara's internal servers. 3 executives were instructed to retain legal counsel. All compliance-related systems were to be frozen pending external oversight. And Malcolm? He was still at home, sitting at the same kitchen table where he'd signed the envelope 3 weeks earlier, binder still on the shelf, coffee warm. Phone face down beside a small notepad scribbled with updates he never spoke aloud. It rang once, then again. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. He looked at it for a long second before answering. "Mr. Reeves?" "Speaking." "This is Supervisory Officer Langford with the Federal Office of Oversight and Whistleblower Protection. I believe you've already anticipated this call." There was a pause. Not of hesitation, of confirmation. "I have," Malcolm said quietly. "We'd like to move forward with next steps. Are you available for a secure coordination this weekend?" Malcolm didn't smile. He didn't lean back like a man who'd won. He just reached for a pen, flipped open a fresh page, and said, "Tell me where to begin." By Monday morning, the tone inside Pentara's HQ had changed from panicked to paralyzed. Nobody was pretending anymore. The whiteboard in the strategy room still had half-erased numbers from last week's revenue projections, but no one bothered to finish the cleanup. It looked like a war zone in mid-pause. Silent desks, muted phones, unread emails stacking like bodies. The board moved fast once the call from D.C. came through. Trent Barlow was suspended pending internal review, which was corporate speak for "you're done, we just need paperwork to match." His office was sealed before lunch. An IT rep wheeled his company laptop into a locked room, and security changed his building access before his car even left the garage. 2 other senior execs, finance ops, and legal strategy were placed on administrative leave by noon. No warning, no press. Just 2 blank Outlook statuses and inboxes auto-forwarded to temporary assistants who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The board issued a formal statement that afternoon. It was thin, almost sterile, but one line carried the weight of everything they had ignored for the last year. "We take federal integrity seriously and are cooperating fully with all regulatory inquiries. As of today, all internal compliance functions will report directly to the external audit team until further notice." Translation: we broke it. We know we broke it. Someone else is in charge now. HR sent out a quiet directive that anyone involved in finance, compliance, or risk had to prepare backup copies of their last 12 months of work. A few people tried to push back, citing overload. Nobody argued a second time. The new sheriff wasn't internal, and nobody wanted their name showing up on the wrong email thread now that the feds were watching. Meanwhile, across town, in a nondescript federal building with linoleum floors and lighting that flickered slightly every 13 seconds, Malcolm sat in a waiting room. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look smug or even particularly relaxed. He looked focused. Binder in one hand, envelope in the other. Same brown jacket, sleeves rolled up just enough to expose the faded ink of a decade-old watch tattoo on his forearm. He didn't check his phone. He didn't glance at the wall clock. He just waited, like someone who'd been patient for so long he didn't know how to do anything else. Then the door opened. A woman in a slate gray blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand, and said, "Mr. Reeves, they're ready for you." He stood, straightened his collar, followed her without a word down a hallway that smelled like toner and old paper. Inside, a small conference room waited. 2 chairs, a table, a badge. It was already set there, centered in front of the far seat like a place card at a dinner you didn't expect to be invited to. External Compliance Liaison, Federal Oversight Division. His name was printed below in clean black letters. Malcolm didn't reach for it immediately. He sat down first, opened his binder, and only then did he touch the badge. His fingers brushed over the plastic edge. No tremble, no hesitation. Because this wasn't just a job. It was a reckoning. The kind that doesn't arrive with fireworks, but with silence, protocol, and permanent authority. Outside, the world kept moving. The office lights flickered on in buildings that hadn't even noticed Pintara's collapse beginning. But inside that room, at that table, Malcolm Reeves held something far more dangerous than revenge. He held documentation. And now, full jurisdiction. The training room on Pintara's 14th floor used to be a joke. Cheap folding chairs, flickering projector, a crusty old coffee maker that sounded like it had emphysema. But this time, everything was immaculate. The chairs matched. The air conditioning worked. Someone had even put out bottled water with lemon slices floating inside, like a spa for accountants. A dozen new compliance hires sat in stiff rows, pens poised, laptops glowing. They didn't speak much. Their eyes flicked to the glass wall where, just last quarter, Trent Barlow had stood announcing non-critical role reductions. His name was gone now, scrubbed from the org chart, his office empty and silent. The onboarding manager cleared her throat, trying to hide how nervous she was. Let's begin with oversight protocol. Until further notice, all final compliance reports, quarterly, annual, or exception-based, must be externally reviewed and signed off by a federally authorized consultant. She clicked her remote. The projector blinked, then lit up with a name. Malcolm Reeves, Federal Consultant. Authorized Signatory External Compliance Liaison, FOD. The room shifted. Not visibly, but you could feel it. A few heads tilted, a few brows rose. One woman in the back actually whispered, "Wait, that's the guy? The guy who got fired? The guy whose name never left the Federal Registry? The guy who walked back into the building through the front door, not with a key card, but with jurisdiction? He didn't sit at a desk anymore. He didn't clock in. He didn't answer to HR. He was there for one thing, to sign off. The final gatekeeper." I watched it unfold from the back of the room. I wasn't part of onboarding. I was there to observe, maybe report back to the board. But really, I just wanted to see if it felt real, if the myth they'd whispered in hallways and panicked group chats had a pulse. And it did. Malcolm entered 5 minutes after the slide appeared. No fanfare, just him, holding that same goddamn binder and a federal badge clipped to his belt. He nodded once at the onboarding manager, who practically jumped out of the way and took his seat at the table near the projector. The quarterly report was placed in front of him. 300 pages of legalese, audit trails, and sign-off logs, now reviewed, annotated, corrected, and finalized by the same man whose severance had come in a blank envelope 8 weeks prior. He flipped to the final page. The signature block stared back. He reached for the pen, not a special one, just a standard black ballpoint, and signed his name with clean, careful strokes. Malcolm Reeves, Federal Consultant, December 29th, 2025. One of the junior auditors leaned forward, brow furrowed, and asked, Did you used to work here?" Malcolm didn't look up right away. He closed the binder first, set the pen down, adjusted the edge of the document like he was making sure the paper itself understood it was done. Then he looked the kid straight in the eye and said, briefly. Then they restructured. A couple of the new hires chuckled under their breath, not loud, just enough to acknowledge that they knew, that this wasn't just some consultant. This was the ghost in the system. The reason they even had a training room again. The reason Trent's name was buried under a legal freeze and 2 federal investigations. As Malcolm stood to leave, no one spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He just walked past the framed org chart on the wall, now redrafted with a footnote that read, All compliance signatory authority currently delegated to external oversight. And there, in bold, was his name. Still there, still in control, not critical staff. Essential.